A blessed morning to everyone. I am Dizon Rina, your presenter for today. And for today's agenda, we will going to discuss collaborative projects. So when we say collaborative projects, this is a group project that allows group of people to work together in a particular activity. So under collaborative projects, there are two subtopics. First is my report, which is the problem-based learning, and second is the project-based learning to be discussed by Ms. Sayaf Martizano. So let's start at problem-based learning.
Problem-based learning is also known as PBL. According to John Dewey, true learning is based on discovery rather than the transmission of knowledge, which is tama naman 'di ba? Ang totoong pagkatuto, yung ikaw mismo yung nakadiskubre ng isang concept or idea. Kabilang ka in the learning process at ang maganda dito, mas mataas yung chances ng retention of information unlike dun sa transmission of knowledge na tanggap ka lang ng tanggap ng information from the teacher and mas madali mo siyang makakalimutan. So bago tayo mag-proceed sa pinaka-discussion natin about problem-based learning, let's compare muna yung traditional method versus problem-based learning. So in traditional method, yung teacher ang nagiging primary source of information. Siya lang or sa kanya lang nanggagaling lahat ng information while etong mga students ay nakikinig lang at tanggap lang ng information from the teacher. Ang nangyayari dito, madalas etong mga students ay nagiging or naboboard at kaunti lang yung nare-retain na information sa utak nila. So in short, traditional method is teacher-centered, while problem-based learning naman ay yung mga students ang responsible in their own learning, while yung teacher ay nagiging guide or facilitator na lang. So in short, problem-based learning is student-centered. Problem-based learning is originated in the year 1960s and it is a teaching pedagogy that is student-centered. Ibig sabihin, mas na-emphasize yung role ng student in the learning process than the role of the teacher. So, paano ba natututo yung mga estudyante using the PBL approach? Students learn about a topic through problem solving of problems. So, si teacher magpro-provide siya ng problem and itong mga students ang kailangan nilang gawin ay mag-propose ng best solution about sa problem na yon. So, pag sinabi natin problem-based learning, it is a group activity. So, students work in a group to solve the problem where often there is no one correct answer. Ibig sabihin, walang mali at iisang sagot. Lahat ng sagot na ipopropose ng students ay maaaring tama lahat. So, here are the problem-based learning objectives. First is to foster increased retention of knowledge. So, isa sa mga goal ng PBL is palawakin or i-enhance pa yung kakayahan ng mga estudyante pagdating sa remembering and understanding of concept and ideas. Pangalawa is to develop problem-solving skills. 'Di ba ang PBL, yung mga students ay naghahanap ng best solution to the problem. So mas nade-develop yung kanilang problem-solving skills using the PBL approach. Third is to develop self-directed lifelong learning skills. So, etong problem-based learning, nagbibigay siya ng real-world experience sa mga estudyante na maaari nilang magamit at mai-apply sa kanilang pang-araw-araw na buhay. And pang-apat is become effective collaborators. Since PBL is a group activity, mas na-enhance yung kanilang social skills at pakikipag kapwa-tao.
Now let's discuss the steps in problem-based learning. This is the original steps in PBL. So step number 1 is the clarify. The students read through the problem, then identify and clarify any words or concept that they do not understand. In this step, Students will identify and clarify unfamiliar terms presented in the scenario. At the beginning of the session, the problems should be presented to students. If you use paper cases, one of the students read it aloud to get the group talking from the beginning. The first activity of the group should be the clarification of problems, terms, and concepts not understood at the first moment. The purpose of the first step is to agree on the meaning of the various words and terms and on the situation prescribed in the problem. Use can be made of the knowledge possessed by the group members or retrieved from a dictionary. Next step is the step number 2, which is the define. The students work together to define what they think the problem is. In this step, a student must define the problem or problems to be discussed. Definition of the problem is the main goal during this phase. The group should discuss and reach an agreement on the tricky events which need explanation. Occasionally, a problem has been intentionally described on the way to test the student's ability to recognize certain symptoms. Though they have some prior knowledge to recognize a problem, the prior knowledge doesn't allow them to resolve the problem straight away. Next is the step number 3, which is the analyze. The students discuss the problem. At this stage, there is no shifting of ideas. Aspects on basis of prior knowledge are collected. This should result in ideas to structure the problem. Each individual may express his or her ideas free and without immediate discussion. It is important not to discuss and not to comment the ideas of others during this step, but to collect many ideas. Together, students will compile ideas of underlying circumstances of the problem and implications arising from the problem. Next is the step number 4, which is the review. Students now try to arrange their ideas and explanations into tentative solutions. During the fourth step, which forms the core of the analysis, the problem is explained on different ways. Ideas, which seems to be related, are worked out in a relation to each other. Each group member is allowed to fully present ideas about matter. Group members can draw on all the prior knowledge they possess. This prior knowledge may be based on information acquired in earlier education, facts, and insight obtained by reading different articles, or on another way. The other members of the group and the tutor are allowed to probe the student's knowledge to the full, to introduce other explanations and question certain opinions. The process of brainstorming and discussion is a collaborative approach. It leads to more creativity and output than each member of the group could generate on his own. Next step is the step number 5, identify learning objectives. The group reaches a consensus on learning objectives. Tutor must ensure that the learning objectives are focused, achievable, comprehensive, and appropriate. The systematic approach and discussion may result in several outlines written down on the blackboard. These outlines are likely possible explanations for particular problem. However, since students' prior knowledge is limited, questions will come up and dilemmas will arise. In this phase of the discussion, conflict between members of tutorial group should arise. The students will find out that certain aspects are not yet explained and resolved in the process of their discussion. PBL encourages students to define this aspect as learning goals, putting them in charge of learn. This state of cognitive dissonance between what I know and what I have to know to understand the outside world is an essential condition for PBL. Questions and dilemmas, which appear during session, can be used as learning goals for individual self-directed learning. So, the main aim of this step is to formulate learning objectives on which group will concentrate their activities during Phase 6. In this stage, it is possible to use conceptual map as a tool for research summary, making associations, integrating information, proceeding information, and transferring it to long-term knowledge, but also a tool for defining new learning objectives.
Next is the step number 6, self-study. Students individually gather information towards the learning objectives and prepare to share their findings with the rest of the group. During this phase, students are going home and study. This phase is supposed to provide answers to the questions evoked in the problem analysis phase and offer students possibility to acquire a more profound knowledge of theories at the root of the problem. The students or the group members collect information individually with respect to the defined learning objectives. Information is collected from the literature, but also from other sources like library, journals, internet, etc. PBL is also important because it gives possibility to students to find their own resources. Minimal time for their individual study is 2 days, but could be longer. Students can learn individually, but also in pair or in groups. It is important to already decide in advance how the result of this self-study period will be presented by an individual, small group, or as a discussion of all groups. Students explore relevant sources of knowledge and then put the new information together, possibly resolving all the issues that were left open. Lastly is the step number 7, which is a report. The students come together in their group and share the result. The facilitator checks that the learning objectives have been met. In this phase, the tutor checks the learning and may assess the group. So the final step is synthesizing and testing the newly acquired information. Members of the group are sharing information gathered at home among each other. They also discuss whether they now acquired more proficient, accurate, detailed explanation and understanding about what is going on behind the problem. If some of the students haven't understood the issue well, task of the students is to try to explain them methodology of their work. In this step, it would be necessary for the certain types of all problems to check for students' decision-making process and then algorithm behind their decision. It is also important to provide feedback. We found it very helpful to institutionalize this step. It includes feedback of all students on the case, the process, and the tutor to improve the learning process. Also, it is very important the students validate the course and give their comments on the quality of the problem as well on the quality of the group process and the tutor's performance. For us to fully understand the steps, here is the PBL teaching and learning template. First, we have the understand the problem. Under this are the steps you need to know. First is to meet the problem, know and need to know. And lastly, define the problem statement. Next is we have this explore the curriculum. Under these are the steps of gathering information, sharing information, and generating possible solutions. And lastly is the resolve the problem. Under this are the steps of determining the best fit solution to the problem, presenting the solution, and debrief the problem. Now, sa ating module, merong sinuggest na steps ng PBL. This was adapted from Sivinichi and Makishi 2014. So later, titignan natin kung ano yung pinagkaiba ng original dito sa sinuggest na steps. So first step is students are assigned to permanent groups to explore the problem, organize their thoughts, and define the concept or element of the problem. Dito sa first step, the teacher will divide the class into small groups, and they will going to explore the problem, sharing of insights and ideas to the group by listing what they already know and need to know. Next is the step number 2. Students identify resources related to the problem. In this step, students now identify the materials they needed in the problem-solving process, resources like articles from the internet, or they will going to conduct a survey or questionnaire in gathering information. Next is this step number 3. Students attempt to determine the nature of the problem. Saan ba nagmula or nagugat ang problemang ito? Ano yung current status or paano siya nakakaapekto sa atin ngayon? So next is the step number 4. Students pose questions about the problem. These are questions students don't yet understand and require a new learning. Students may ask to other learners or they may provide survey or questionnaire. They can also post questions on different social media sites like Brainly or in the other social media sites where they can get new information that they may use in their problem solving process. Next is the step number 5. Students record and discuss learning issues. They continually determine what they don't know and what needs further investigation. In this step, students may list what they already know and acquire. What are the questions that are still no answer or remain unanswerable? Step number 6. Students list the learning issues in order of their importance and assign them to individuals or to the whole group. This is the phase of assigning of work in every member of the group and gathering of data and information. Step number 7. Students discuss needed resources with the instructor as well as constraints that may interfere with solving the problem. Students discuss and verify the materials needed in the problem-solving process with their teacher, as well as the problem they may face during the process. Step number 8, students select an initial response to the problem using criteria they develop, such as cost, materials needed, political processes, environmental constraints to determine if the response is an acceptable solution. After they gather information, it is now the time for them to select a possible and acceptable solution to the proposed problem. Step number 9. Students determine what must be done to arrive at an acceptable solution, review and analyze the learning issues, and work toward integrating their knowledge. Next is the step number 10. Students choose a solution to the problem and evaluate the solution. Now, they will going to try their hypothesis or the solution they propose if it is actually fit to the problem. Next is the step number 11. Students determine ways to monitor their solution. In monitoring the solution they propose, they may use a criteria to evaluate if the proposed solution worked in the problem. And lastly, the step number 12. Students continue to determine new learning issues related to the problem. Now, let's compare kung may pinagkaiba ba yung original steps ng PBL dito sa sinuggest na step. Kung titignan natin ng maigi, wala namang masyadong pinagbago or pagkakaiba pagdating dun sa thought na gusto nilang sabihin. So, nagkaiba lang sila in the structure of the steps kasi in the original, gumamit lang siya ng mga words para sabihin yung mga steps. While dito sa adapted naman, or dun sa sinuggest is sentences naman yung kanyang ginamit. In applying problem-based learning in today's curriculum, there are many changes happened, especially in the role of students and teacher. In problem-based learning, the traditional teacher and students' role change. The students assume increasing responsibility for their learning, giving them more motivation and more feelings of accomplishment, setting the pattern for them to become successful lifelong learners. Ibig sabihin, hindi na sila passive learners, but instead, they are active learners. Kung baga, kabilang na sila in the learning process and they are responsible for their own learning. While the faculty in turn become resources, tutors, and evaluators, guiding the students in their problem-solving efforts. Kung sa traditional approach, more on ang emphasis ay nasa teacher at siya yung nagiging source of information, dito ay nagiging faculty or tutor or guide na lang siya ng mga students in problem solving process. Students who complete problem-based learning often shares the outcome and jointly set the learning goals and outcome with the teacher. It is more likely to be a single subject and shorter. Here in PBL, teacher uses scenarios and cases that are perhaps less related to real life and more on hypothesis. In conclusion, it is probably the importance of conducting active learning with students that is worthy and not the actual name of the task. Problem-based learning have place in today's classroom and can promote 21st century learning. In short, problem-based learning focus is on the search of solution on a presented problem. Learners also use scientific method. Students' higher order thinking skills will be exercised.